Hi everyone. So here we are again, Mirko and Ash, for the third and last episode on the blockchain and supply chain deep dive. So again, we're here with Najib Rahman from EDRX, and Nash. I think we closed the last episode talking about the big opportunity, the big promise, the work that you guys are doing there in Asia and in Africa, and now this could be a drive for significant change. I think, like many other technologies, many other innovations, very often, since we talked before about obstacles and hurdles to wide adoption, one of the issues is sometimes to have like a proper business case in place. And now, without digging into numbers, the question I would like you to help me answer is, what could potentially be the case for blockchain adoption in supply chain? In any industry, really. Like, probably we touched a little bit on this, talking about the characteristics of blockchain, but why should a company invest in blockchain?
That's a good question. And really, how much time have we got? I think, well, first, the business case has to be addressed as a team. So we've got to make sure that we dig deep into it, because I think there will be subtle nuance that can only come through a good PMO approach, product management approach. But if I were to sort of generalize, I would say that you need to ask yourself some key questions. Am I working in an environment where there are many stakeholders? Most supply logistics operations are working with many stakeholders, everyone from within your own organization to third-party logistics providers, through to those that are distributing the warehousing, and ultimately your. Do I sometimes need to cooperate with my competitors? So is there a need to be able to work and talk? So if we're sharing some platform technologies, car manufacturers are a good example. Many car manufacturers share common parts and components. Equally true for pharma and life science. There are many collaborations within the big drug companies and the small. So do we need to share some information? Some of it will be competitive, it will be sensitive, so you don't want to give everything away, you don't want to give your secret source away, so do we need to do that? And then I think it's really a case of, do I work across multi-sites as well, geographically? Well, obviously, if we're in a global supply chain, I think that answers itself. So those are some of the key things I think we can all ask. So if we just talk about that, then I think you're already in a good position to be talking about potential opportunity to deploy a blockchain-based approach to your supply logistics challenge. I would then say, in terms of what is it you're trying to do? Well, are we trying to drive for efficiency, or are we trying to drive for resilience? Now, that sort of planning and that sort of thinking, and there's a huge amount of debate that could be had about that, and I don't plan to get into that right now. But how we do that is going to require modeling. It's going to require Monte Carlo simulations. You're going to have data and huge volumes of data. And sometimes you're going to need that data, ideally, in real time. One of the challenges that I experienced in my time in Big Pharma were around the fact that I couldn't get that data quick enough to ensure demand management modeling enable us to make sure we had enough manufacturing capability to deliver on vaccines for national immunization programs, etc. If you're only getting data a few days in advance, to manage that upstream to ensure you've got the capacity to manufacture the demand, it's really difficult. And this is not just a problem for pharma and life science. Many industries have, and if we want to get to a near real-time approach to manufacturing with pharma, then I think we're going to have better access and availability to more holistic data across the whole of the industry. Now, what this means is that we start addressing some of those key challenges that many of us talk about, the bullwhip, for example. A handful of extra packets of medicine on a pharmacy shelf in Manchester, in a suburb of Manchester, if that ripples across the whole supply chain with every pharmacy doing the same, that's suddenly 15-20% extra you need in all parts of the supply chain. So your distributor will need to increase their fleet capacity by 20% potentially. They'll have to have greater warehouses. It means that we'll overproduce. Better to be safe than sorry with life sciences. Make more than you actually need. So all of that extra drug, extra product has to go somewhere, and it might not even be used. So if we want to start addressing that sort of waste, where we're overproducing, over manufacturing, over delivering literally with every van that is on the road. And trust me, the pharma industry has a lot of vans delivering to a lot of pharmacies every day of the week. Then I think there's huge savings to be had. And I think that's true of probably many industries, not just the pharma and life science. So I hope that gives you a flavor of where I think getting this better information in a multi-stakeholder, multi-site, where competitors need to collaborate and cooperate more effectively, will enable us to live in a better world where we're saving resource, protecting resource, and also able to drive for a balance, a good balance between resilience and efficiency. That has always been the quandary, because I think we've definitely gone too far towards efficiency and globalization and not able to enable a secure domestic and local need is met first.
And that, my friend, goes in hand in hand with whatever we have seen during COVID-19, I guess, right?
Absolutely.
Exactly. So I think, to summarize really, what you're saying here is that there is a potential gain in efficiency, a potential gain in resilience, and you clearly talked about overproduction and optimizing that, which is speaking basically towards reducing the bullwhip effect, which is a typical plague in any supply chain. So I think that's very interesting. And with that in mind, now you also mentioned something that caught my attention, which is basically this real-time data, what you could potentially do with real-time data, etc. And one of the things that I always been thinking about when looking at blockchain is the opportunity that it creates in terms of, again, production of data, availability of data, access to data. And now that's coupled with certain specific technologies that I have in mind, but I'm not going to share because I don't want to bias your answer. Could create really exponential growth. So, through synergy between blockchain and some other technologies. Is this the case in your opinion as well? And so, what do you see having the greatest potential to be coupled with blockchain for massive digital advancement?
Well, clearly, obviously, AI is going to be something that will be coupled as we get the data and the volume of data to train algorithms to better model, for example, to show where we can improve our logistics operations. I think is going to be imperative, an imperative that none of us will escape. Obviously, there are all sorts of edge technologies, IoT. Many of these things have been around for a while. How we couple it with sensors, smart sensors that are available right now that can deliver real time, particularly for environmental challenges in supply logistics. Obviously, cold chain is the most obvious example, but we've all worked in countries where temperatures exceed, and I've seen literally pallets of vaccines sitting around on tarmacs in hot countries, thinking, why is somebody not moving this? People need to kind of be alerted to these things are going on. So I think those sort of areas. So yes, it will definitely be coupled. It's an inevitability. But like I say, I think the blockchain piece is definitely very much true. The infrastructure piece that needs to be the bedrock from which all of these other things can be then integrated with. Until we're in that space, I think we're a ways off. But we do need to explore how they're going to integrate, and that's already happening right now. I mean, the solutions that I've worked with are already capable of doing that sort of integration with some of these technologies. The AI one, I think, has a way to go yet, and I'm curious to see how that will play out. But I can definitely see how it could support potentially better simulations and modeling of information to ensure that we're improving. As I mentioned before, the balance between resilience and efficiency. I think the one other area where technology will play a part is the area of precision medicine or personalization. So you and I will have unique biology. It will require unique care. How do we do that? So how do we integrate ourselves safely and securely without compromising our privacy into this environment and ecosystem? I think that's going to be one of the big plays as well that we've got to think about. So identity and decentralization of identity and how that integrates to make sure that you get the precision care of, in our case, the medicines I'm talking about, but it could be anything. It could be marketing, it could be banking. All of these things require an understanding of identity and how that plays, and what technologies are going to be developed using clever cryptographic technologies to ensure that our identities remain secure and we're integrated into this environment. I think that's another area. So I'm mixing identity and individuals and us And I think we've got to be very careful about it, because I am a big believer in ensuring our privacy and preserving that privacy, because without it, I think we're at risk.
So do you see any risks associated with that?
We've seen what's happened with the current way the internet has gone, and some of the challenges in the way the data has been used and manipulated. I don't want to get into a big conversation about geopolitics, but data has been harvested for purposes beyond which any of us might have given consent for. And actors have used that data to influence. Now, like most of us, I believe that if I've given permission for data to be used in a certain way, it should be used in that way and not be used in another way. Now, I would like to make sure that technologies are available, that if I choose to switch off the availability or access to my data, I can do so at the flick of a toggle switch on my phone and do it for everybody. That right hasn't quite been achieved. I believe the technologies that we're working with in the blockchain space and that are growing out of the blockchain space, because it's broader than just blockchain, it's cryptographic technologies, I guess is the way to put it. They're going to be key in how we integrate those into the blockchain to ensure that we can protect ourselves as individuals as well in terms of privacy and data protection.
It's one thing that is bugging me.
Yeah, bug away.
talking about successful implementation. So, have you seen any successful implementations? Have you been part of any successful implementations? What do we mean by successful implementation in blockchain? So, can you help me here?
Yeah, I think there are some of the big players that have done interesting things. IBM with Walmart and so on. There are examples. Myself in the advanced therapy space, we were able to show at a hospital in Dresden with Martin Bornhauser how you could improve the delivery of advanced therapies to patients, increasing by 500%. I know that sounds like a big number. In literal absolute volumes, it was 1 patient a day being processed to 5, which in terms of what we're talking about is a huge improvement. But these are isolated. So yes, we can show a successful pilot, a successful example of an implementation of a blockchain-based technology being used in supply logistics. I guess for it to be really successful, it's the wide-scale piece that we started off with in part 1. What is it going to take for it to be more widely adopted? And I think that will ultimately be the true success, because that's when we'll start seeing the network effects of the efficiencies that we've touched on in all of the episodes we've discussed. So yeah, I think we have a way to go to have a truly successful approach. But yes, there are successful examples of pilots where clearly the technology is showing that it can work. We now need to get people to look at it and see how we can make it more widely acceptable and adopted. And I think that will ultimately be true success.
Probably that also through the increased number of pilots and potential attempts to basically create something that could be a good proof of concept, right? Not to use any buzzwords, but clearly, otherwise it's very difficult to buy into the concept on paper.
Agree. And yeah, we need more pilots. We need more people doing it, quite literally. We need to make sure, and maybe this is a bit of a political punch at some of those that are creating the environment for those to make businesses that do this. We need them to encourage it. So whether through financial means, government support, grants, research funding, whatever it is, all of the above. The more we are able to do, the more likely we are going to see greater adoption. So we need to have more businesses trying to do this. Right now, and not to pick on the guys that are doing AI, because I think AI, the genie is out of the bottle. It needs to be explored, it needs to be understood. The debate about whether AI needs to have some sort of moratorium or whether we should go full steam ahead, I think is an important one. But what it has seen is a dearth and a flurry of companies that have come out of it almost immediately. I think what's challenging, and that for the blockchain space, is that I don't think it's seen quite the same. Yes, there are, and maybe it's on a slow burn right now, but I do think we need more companies to do this, because without that, I think other technologies Well, they'll make an impact, but I think they could benefit from a better blockchain Web3 infrastructure, and that's a much bigger piece. To improve, as I said, to go to a high-speed railway, it requires a big effort, and I don't think startups and small companies alone can do that.
So it is anyhow like a bit of a call to action to all players involved. It's obviously a bit of a top-down and bottom-up type of approach that is emerging here. So hopefully a call to action to all our friends who are listening and watching this video interview. Manoj, thank you so very much for being with us.
And thank you for the opportunity. Take care, my friend.
Thank you.